My parents demanded I invite my sister, who slept with my ex, to my wedding. Or they wouldn't come. So I taught them a lesson they'll never forget. My name's Elise, I'm 27, and I recently got married. You'd think that would make it one of the happiest days of my life, right? Well, not exactly. What should have been a beautiful, joyous occasion ended up feeling more like a three-ring circus, all thanks to my lovely family. Instead of basking in the moment and making memories to cherish, I spent the entire day dodging one disaster after another. It was almost like they had made it their personal mission to ruin my wedding, and to be honest, they came pretty close. But I'm not the type to just sit back and let people walk all over me. So, I decided to turn the tables and give them a taste of their own medicine. And now they're acting like I'm the villain in this whole situation. I need an outside perspective on this, so let me lay it all out for you. But first, a little background. I'm the youngest in a family of 5. Let's start with my mom. She's what you'd call an almond mom. You know the type, always hopping on the latest diet craze and finding subtle, or not so subtle, ways to judge whatever I put on my plate. Then there's my dad, who only seems to care about one thing: money. If a conversation doesn't involve stocks, investments, or profits, he's just not interested. Now, my older sister? That's a whole other story. To put it nicely, she's been a thorn in my side for as long as I can remember. She was always the golden child, while I was, well, just there. Growing up, she had this incredible talent for making my life miserable. Somehow, she always managed to flip the script and make me look like the bad guy, no matter what the situation was. Embarrassing me in front of people? That was her specialty. It's safe to say that we never really formed a sisterly bond. The only person in my family I've ever truly felt close to is my grandma. She's the sweetest, most down-to-earth person I know, and honestly, she's the only one who's ever made me feel like I mattered. As for the rest of them? Let's just say, I was more of an afterthought. I spent most of my childhood shipped off to boarding school, so whatever little connection I might have had with my family faded over time. I did have one other person I was close to: my aunt. She was the cool, fun adult in my life, and we spent a lot of time together when I was younger. But when I was around 13, she suddenly moved away. To this day, I don't really know why. It happened right before I was sent off to boarding school, and after that, whatever bond we had just disappeared, along with the rest of my ties to the family. Now, you might be wondering how I ended up in boarding school in the first place. The short answer? My sister. She absolutely hated the fact that mom and dad had another child. She wanted all the attention for herself, and she made it her life's mission to get rid of me, or at least make my life unbearable. I became the perfect scapegoat for everything. She had a habit of breaking things around the house: mom's favorite vase, dad's golf trophies, and somehow, I was always the one who got blamed. She'd put on this wide-eyed, innocent act, complete with crocodile tears, and spin some ridiculous story about how I was the troublemaker. One time, she even managed to convince them that I had stolen money from dad's wallet, which was absurd, considering I didn't even know where he kept it. But, of course, they believed her. Things really came to a head when I was 12. She accidentally spilled red juice all over mom's pristine white couch and immediately pinned it on me, claiming I was the careless one. Another time, she shredded some of dad's important work documents and swore up and down that she'd seen me doing it out of boredom. No matter how ridiculous her accusations were, they always took her word over mine. But the final straw? That was when she broke a crystal bowl, a family heirloom that had been passed down for generations. She insisted that I had been fooling around and knocked it over. Mom and dad were furious. Instead of even considering that she might be lying, they decided I was too much trouble and sent me away to boarding school. From that point on, my parents were basically ghosts in my life. They never showed up for any of my school events. I remember one time, I had a big piano recital. It was a huge deal to me. I scanned the audience, hoping to see them there, but all I saw were strangers. Another time, I spent weeks working on a science fair project, and when I actually won first place, they weren't there to celebrate. They barely even called. After a while, I just stopped expecting them to. It became normal not to have them around. When I finished school and moved back home for college, I thought maybe things would be different. Maybe now that I was older, I could actually have some kind of relationship with them. But the second I moved back in with my sister, the same old drama kicked right back up again. Living with her was like stepping into a battlefield every single day. She was still the center of attention, and she made sure to keep it that way. She had always been the popular one, the hometown girl who knew everyone, while I was just the outsider trying to keep a low profile. But she couldn't stand the thought of people comparing us, so she made sure to put me in my place. She started small, throwing little digs at me whenever her friends were around. One time, she casually mentioned in front of everyone that I was a late bloomer academically, which wasn't even remotely true. Another time, she threw a massive party at our house and made sure I wasn't invited just to drive home the fact that I didn't belong. But the final straw? Prom night. I walked in and caught her with my boyfriend. And the worst part? She didn't even try to hide it. She actually wanted me to see. The way she smirked at me, like she was proud of it, like she was daring me to do something about it, it was the last push I needed. I finally went to my mom, just hoping that she'd take my side, or at least acknowledge how messed up it was. But she just shrugged it off like it was nothing. That was the moment I knew I had to leave. So, I did. I packed up and moved to a different city for college, cutting off my family and starting fresh. Now, since I was still in school, I needed help covering my tuition. I had to ask my family for money, and thankfully, they agreed. But it wasn't until later that I found out it wasn't mom and dad who had helped me, it was grandma. She was the one who had been quietly supporting me all along. While I was building my new life, something incredible happened. I met someone. Someone who actually treated me the way I deserved to be treated. We fell in love, got engaged, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly cherished. When we decided to get married, I wanted it to be a perfect day, a celebration of love and happiness. And for a while, it felt like it was going to be just that. Everything I dreamed of and more. But, of course, my family had other plans. When it came time to share the big news with my family, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. After everything I'd been through, I wanted them to know that I was doing well, that I was happy. But deep down, I wasn't sure how they'd react. And, well, turns out, I was right to be cautious. Their response to my engagement was lukewarm at best. A half-hearted "oh, okay. That's nice." No excitement, no heartfelt congratulations, just a bare minimum acknowledgement. They didn't seem to have any strong objections, but they weren't exactly thrilled, either. I wasn't expecting them to throw a parade or anything, so I just let it slide and moved forward with planning my wedding. That's when Mom suggested I come back home and have the wedding there. Now, I wasn't exactly keen on that idea. I had built a life for myself in my new town, and I wanted to celebrate this milestone here, in the place that truly felt like home. So, I politely turned her down and decided to keep the wedding local. As the planning kicked into gear, my parents were pretty much non-existent. They didn't offer any help, didn't ask about details, didn't seem particularly interested at all. On the flip side, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were absolute lifesavers. They jumped in with both feet, helping with everything from finding the perfect venue to making sure all the little details were taken care of. Their support made the entire process so much more enjoyable. I actually felt like I was part of a family that cared. Then came the invitations. After I sent them out, Mom called me up and casually mentioned that I'd made a mistake. I had forgotten to include my sister's name. Before I could even respond, she brushed it off, saying it was no big deal because she had already told my sister about the wedding, and they'd all be there. Hold on a second. That wasn't a mistake. I hadn't forgotten to put my sister's name on the invitation. I had left her out on purpose. I didn't want her at my wedding. When I told Mom that, she waved it off like I was being ridiculous. She said I was acting childish and making a big deal out of nothing. But when I reminded her very clearly that my sister had slept with my ex, and that was exactly why I didn't want her there, Mom lost it. Suddenly, I was the unreasonable one. She accused me of holding on to petty grudges, saying I needed to be the bigger person and use this as an opportunity to rebuild our relationship. I was stunned. Rebuild what, exactly? There was never anything solid between us to begin with. And after everything my sister had done, how could Mom seriously expect me to just let it go for the sake of so-called family unity? It was like my feelings didn't matter at all, only maintaining some fake image of togetherness. I wasn't having it. I told her straight up that there had never been any real unity in our family, at least not for me. I had always been the outsider, the afterthought. I made it clear my sister was not welcome at my wedding. That's when Mom played her final card. She told me that if my sister wasn't invited, then no one from the family would come. That was it. That was my breaking point. She was actually using my own wedding as a bargaining chip, trying to manipulate me into doing what she wanted. I was so furious, I didn't even argue. I just hung up and made up my mind I wasn't going to change anything. My sister was not coming to my wedding, period. As I sat there, stewing over everything, I had a realization. My family had never cared about my feelings. Not when I was a kid, not when I was struggling, and certainly not now. So if they were going to threaten to skip my wedding just because I refused to include someone who had betrayed me, then why should I care what they thought? And that's when I decided to make a little move of my own. If my family wanted to play games, fine. I could play, too. I decided to invite someone they definitely wouldn't approve of, my aunt. Now, let me give you a little backstory on my aunt. She was always Dad's least favorite, and there was this long-standing tension between them. Despite that, she had always been kind to me and my sister when we were kids. But then, something happened, some kind of huge fallout. She moved away, and just like that, she was cut out of our lives. Over the years, I picked up bits and pieces of the story. From what I could gather, Dad had set her up, stirring up drama between her and Grandma. And Mom? She wasn't innocent either. She had played a part in sabotaging my aunt's marriage. I never got the full details, but one thing was clear: my parents had done a number on her. So I reached out. At first, getting in touch with her wasn't easy. She didn't respond to my messages, so I decided to take matters into my own hands and show up at her place in person. To my surprise, she had been living nearby this whole time. When she first answered the door, she was wary, understandably so. But after I explained everything, how Mom, Dad, and my sister had treated me, how I had always felt sidelined, she finally let me in. We sat down over tea, and little by little, she started to open up about what had really happened between her and the family. And wow! Here's the rundown. My aunt had a boyfriend that Grandma didn't approve of. Mom and Dad took advantage of that, filling Grandma's head with lies. They convinced her that my aunt was planning to elope and didn't care about her feelings. Then they turned around and told my aunt that Grandma had given her an ultimatum: either break up with her boyfriend or be disowned. Completely devastated, my aunt tried to reason with Grandma, but by then, the damage had already been done. My parents had poisoned the well. Grandma believed that my aunt had already chosen her boyfriend over family, and things spiraled fast. Grandma was so upset that she ended up having a minor health scare and had to be hospitalized. And here's where my dad really showed his true colors. He told my aunt that Grandma didn't want to see her, that she had been cut off for good. None of it was true, but my aunt had no way of knowing that. She felt abandoned, like the family had turned its back on her completely. And my parents weren't done yet. They spread even more lies, telling everyone that my aunt had been selfish and heartless, that she only cared about herself and had stolen money from Grandma's account to support her boyfriend. It was all fabricated, but by the time my aunt realized how much of it was manipulation, it was too late. She had already distanced herself from everyone, and she didn't have the courage to try and fix things. Hearing all of this made my blood boil. My parents had mastered the art of twisting stories and turning people against each other. They had done it to me my entire life, and they had done it to my aunt, too. Even after all these years, they were still out there, spinning their little webs of lies. And suddenly, I knew I had made the right decision. I wanted my aunt at my wedding. Not just to spite my parents, but because she actually deserved to be there. Because she, like me, had been cast aside by the very people who were supposed to love us. It was time to start standing up for myself. And inviting my aunt? That was just the beginning. Even though she never really planned on being part of it, I managed to convince my aunt to come to my wedding. I also encouraged her to try and clear things up with Grandma. It took some effort, but in the end, she agreed. When I told her about how my sister had treated me and how my family was pushing for her to be invited, my aunt wasn't exactly thrilled. Still, she decided to come anyway, probably just to support me. Then came the big day. Right from the start, things were tense. My sister showed up with my mom, and, of course, the snide comments started almost immediately. Mom was glued to my sister, showering her with attention, right up until she spotted my aunt. The look on her face? Priceless. Shock. Anger. A little bit of panic. It was all there. She marched straight up to me, fuming, demanding to know why I had invited my aunt. I just smiled and told her exactly what she had told me. I wanted to rebuild our family bonds. Wasn't this a chance for us to be a happy family again? Oh, she did not like that. She looked ready to cause a scene, but thankfully, I had already warned my sister-in-law about the situation. She stepped in, handled things like a pro, and made sure we could move forward with the ceremony without any interruptions. Despite the tension, the wedding itself was beautiful. As I walked down the aisle, I could practically feel my family's judgment burning into me. But for once, I didn't care. This was my day. I had spent my entire life being sidelined, but now? I was making my own choices. I was standing up for myself. But just when I thought we had gotten past the worst of it, the reception happened. While everyone else was enjoying the evening, my aunt had pulled Grandma aside into a separate room to talk, something that should have happened years ago. But my parents? They weren't about to let that happen. They were practically banging on the door, desperate to barge in and interfere. Meanwhile, my sister was making snide remarks about the wedding. The decorations looked so cheap, she whispered to one of the guests, just loud enough for me to hear. Luckily, my sister-in-law had a sharp tongue and zero patience for nonsense. She fired back effortlessly, pointing out how everyone was having a great time and how maybe, just maybe, the focus of a wedding should be on the actual newlyweds instead of petty drama. I was exhausted. I had spent months planning a day that was supposed to be about love and happiness, and instead, I was stuck dealing with my family's never-ending chaos. I told my parents to back off and give my aunt and grandma some space. Let them talk. Just for once, let something happen without turning it into a battle. They didn't take that well. Instead of listening, they turned on me. Suddenly, I was the villain. They started yelling, accusing me of trying to break up the family, of creating more drama. And that's when my husband and mother-in-law had enough. They stepped in, putting their foot down. My mother-in-law, who had been nothing but kind and supportive through all of this, made it clear that if my parents didn't stop, they'd be removed. That's when my dad completely lost it. In front of everyone, he let loose. He called me a disappointment, said he never really liked me, that I was always the problem child, always the difficult one. He made it crystal clear that, in his eyes, I had never been anything but a burden. I could feel myself breaking down. The years of neglect, the years of feeling unwanted, all boiling over in that one moment. But before I could even process it, my husband stepped up and did what I never had the strength to do. He called security. Within minutes, my parents were escorted out of the venue. It was a tough moment, but also a strangely freeing one. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just enduring their behavior, I was done with it. After that, we salvaged what was left of the night. We danced, we laughed, we celebrated. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was surrounded by people who actually cared. And then, much later, when everything had wrapped up, I finally checked my phone. It was blowing up with notifications. At first, I thought it was just wedding messages, but then I realized it was my sister. While I had been celebrating, she had been busy live-streaming her own little sob story. Full-blown, dramatic tears for her followers. She had spun the entire night into some wild, victimized narrative about how I was the ungrateful, heartless sister who had thrown our poor parents out of my wedding. Apparently, she had been playing the perfect daughter routine, telling her audience that she had always supported me, but I had never appreciated it. That I had always been jealous of her. That I had disrespected our family on the most important day of my life. And people were eating it up. The comments were full of sympathy. How could your own sister do that to you? You deserve better, girl. Wow, she sounds so toxic. It was like watching my entire life play out in real time, the same manipulation, the same lies, only now with an audience. Instead of simply enjoying my own wedding, I was trapped in yet another one of my sister's melodramatic performances. It didn't matter how far I ran, how much I tried to escape, I could never outrun my family's chaos. At that moment, I knew. I needed to get away. For good. So, in the middle of all this chaos, I did the only thing that made sense. I called Grandma. I needed at least one sane person to talk to, and to my surprise, when she answered, she actually sounded peaceful. Turns out, after their private talk during the wedding, she and my aunt had finally had an honest conversation for the first time in years. For the first time, Aunt laid everything out, how Mom and Dad had twisted the whole situation with her boyfriend, how they had convinced Grandma that Aunt was planning to run off and abandon the family. Aunt explained that she had tried to tell the truth back then, but by the time she even got the chance, Mom and Dad had already filled Grandma's head with lies. They had made it seem like Aunt didn't care about the family at all, that she was going to elope no matter what. Hearing all of this left Grandma shocked. For all these years, she had believed Aunt had just chosen to leave. But Aunt told her the real story, how, after Grandma had her health scare and was hospitalized, Dad had flat out refused to let her visit. He told her that Grandma didn't want to see her, that she had already made up her mind to cut her off. And Aunt? She believed him. Of course, she did. She didn't want to cause more stress, so she just walked away. Meanwhile, Dad made sure Grandma thought Aunt had abandoned her on purpose, while Aunt thought Grandma had disowned her. It was a total mess. Right there at my wedding, Grandma and Aunt started piecing everything together. Grandma admitted that over the years, she had been hurt and confused by how Aunt had just disappeared from her life. She had spent years wondering why she had never reached out, especially after Grandma's health scares. Aunt told her the truth, she had tried. Every time she called, Mom was the one who answered and conveniently handled it. Once, she had sent flowers to Grandma after surgery, but Mom told Grandma they were from a family friend. Another time, she mailed Grandma a birthday card, and Mom simply never passed it on. Hearing all this, Grandma broke down, apologizing over and over for not questioning things sooner. And Aunt, in turn, admitted that she had been too angry and scared to reach out after everything that had happened. They cried. They hugged. And just like that, years of tension melted away. So while I was dealing with my sister's meltdown and my parents' outbursts, at least something good had come from the wedding. And honestly, that realization gave me the push I needed. I was done with my family's nonsense. So, I made a decision. I was going to sue my sister for defamation. Because at this point, I was over it. When I told Aunt and Grandma, they actually backed me up. Grandma even admitted that she wished she had seen through Mom and Dad's lies sooner. And Aunt? Well, she wasn't stopping at moral support. She had decided to sue my parents for manipulation and mental harassment. And, of course, now my parents are blaming me for everything. According to them, I'm the reason the family is falling apart. Seriously? They spent years lying, scheming, and turning everyone against each other, but somehow I'm the villain because I wouldn't play along? Give me a break. Update 1. So, it's been a week since the wedding, and let me tell you, things have been interesting, to say the least. First of all, I've been reading everyone's comments, and I really appreciate the support. Now, for the people calling me stupid and saying I deserved this for even keeping contact with my family in the first place, let's be real here. This is my family we're talking about. Of course, I loved them. Back then, I still had hope. I never imagined they would actually stoop this low. But now, I see them for who they really are. And I'm not putting up with it anymore. Anyway, here's the update. My mother-in-law is a little annoyed by all the drama, which I totally get. Who wants to deal with family nonsense right after a wedding? But overall, she's been great, just a little irritated that my parents managed to turn my big day into yet another disaster. The bright side? My husband and sister-in-law have been amazing through all of this. They've backed me up 100%, and honestly, that's made dealing with everything a lot easier. Oh, and in case anyone was wondering, yes, I actually sued my sister over that video. She thought she could just go online, spread a bunch of lies, and make herself look like the victim while trashing me in front of thousands of people? Yeah, no. My lawyer says I have a strong case. By publicly spreading false accusations, she's damaged my reputation in a way that could have serious legal consequences. We're talking potential damages for emotional distress and defamation of character. She might even have to publicly retract her statements. Honestly? Serves her right. But that's not all. Aunt decided she wasn't going to let my parents off the hook either. She's suing them for manipulation and mental harassment. And according to our lawyer, she's got a solid case. Especially with all the evidence of how they systematically destroyed her relationship with Grandma. The blocked calls, the hidden birthday cards, the outright lies they told? Yeah, that's not just family drama, that's malicious manipulation. At the end of the day, my parents and sister wanted to control everything. They wanted to paint me as the problem. But guess what? I'm done playing their game. For years, my parents had controlled everything, blocking my aunt from seeing Grandma, spreading lies, and manipulating every situation to serve their narrative. But now, they were finally being held accountable. If things went our way, they'd be facing some serious legal consequences, including financial compensation for the emotional damage they had inflicted on my aunt. And the moment they realized we weren't backing down, they panicked. At first, they tried playing nice, calling, texting, pretending to be sorry. They begged us to let it go for the sake of the family. When that didn't work, they snapped. Suddenly, I was the villain. I was the one tearing the family apart, the one being vindictive. Dad went on about how I was ungrateful, how I was punishing them for just trying to do the right thing. But honestly, I wasn't falling for their guilt trips anymore. Update 2. So, Reddit, we finally had our day in court. And let me tell you, it was everything I needed it to be. First up, my sister. She strutted into court like the main character of some tragic drama, playing the innocent victim. It was almost comical. But then my lawyer presented everything, the livestream where she fake cried about me, the posts where she spread outright lies, the proof that she deliberately tried to ruin my reputation. The judge? Not impressed. She tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, but the video told the truth. There was no way to twist it. The verdict? The judge ruled in my favor. She was found guilty of deliberate and malicious defamation. I was awarded compensation for emotional distress, not a fortune, but enough to make a point. And the best part? She was ordered to publicly retract her statements. Yep, she had to post an official apology on all her social media platforms, admitting she lied. And knowing how much she cares about her online image? Pure gold. Then came my parents' turn. My aunt's case was more complicated, but she had receipts, text messages, emails, even handwritten letters that exposed just how much my parents had manipulated her over the years. It was damning. There were texts where Dad told Grandma that Aunt didn't care about her. And one email where Mom literally pretended to be Grandma, telling aunt to stay away. Their lawyer tried to spin it, but the evidence spoke for itself. The ruling? The court found my parents guilty of emotional and mental harassment. Not only were they ordered to pay my aunt a significant sum in damages, ironically, more than they had ever spent on me, but they also had a restraining order placed against them. They legally cannot contact or go near my aunt ever again. And the relief on her face when that verdict came down? That was priceless. My parents, of course, still tried to play the victims. At one point, Dad even yelled in the courtroom, ranting about how Aunt and I were ungrateful, how he had sacrificed so much for the family, how I had always been a problem child. The judge shut him down real quick. And I won't lie, it was satisfying to watch. Update 3. The drama isn't over just yet, but for once, things are actually looking up. Here's the latest bombshell. Grandma has officially removed Mom and Dad from her property and inheritance. Yep, you read that right. She's done with them. After seeing firsthand how much damage they had done, how they manipulated, controlled, and lied, she decided they didn't deserve anything. Instead, she's leaving everything to my aunt and me. I was shocked when she told me. But she was firm. You both deserve this, after everything, she said. Aunt even tried to tell her it wasn't necessary, but Grandma wouldn't budge. Of course, my parents lost it. And instead of coming after me directly, they tried a new tactic, going after my mother-in-law. Yep. They started calling her, texting her, trying to paint me as the villain and get her on their side. But here's the thing, my mother-in-law is not one to be fooled. She shut them down immediately. She even forwarded me their desperate messages so I could see how pathetic they had become. At that point, I knew I had to take one final step. I followed my aunt's lead, and got a restraining order against my family. It was the right move. I didn't want them trying to pull any more stunts, especially when they were now trying to drag my husband's family into their mess. With the restraining order in place, I finally had peace of mind. No more calls. No more texts. No more guilt trips. Nothing. And for the first time, I feel free. Life after the drama. Things are actually good. My husband and I are settling into married life, and for the first time, there's no unnecessary chaos hanging over me. Honestly, I wish none of this had ever happened. But in a weird way, I feel like it was necessary. Like I had to go through this storm to finally clear out all the toxic energy in my life. Grandma and Aunt have even started living together, and they're so much happier now. And me? I finally get to live my life on my own terms. No more games. No more manipulation. No more family politics. Just peace. So yeah, I guess this is the conclusion. Thank you to everyone who supported me. I really needed the motivation.